is Lilian Okibe. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about things that you should not do to your starter locks if you want your locks to be as thick, as rich, as healthy, and as voluminous as possible. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, then please keep on watching. Now, the first thing that you should not do if you want your locks to be as thick and as full and as rich and as voluminous as possible is for you to not wear styles with hair extensions in the starter lock phase. So many people often ask me this question because I know that in the beginning of your lock journey, when your locks get frizzy and you look different from how you're used to, and many people will interpret that as being like untidy and like scruffy and things like that. It's hard, right? And the easiest, like what many people want to do is just go ahead and slap in some like box braids or like Senegalese twist or something like that with extensions. That's the easy way out. But that is not actually the best or the wise thing to do if you're trying to get your locks to be as thick as possible. Because what happens is all those hairstyles, all those styles with lock extensions weigh down your hair. And depending on how long you have the style in for, it can cause issues on your scalp. Like it can cause thinning at your roots from the start of your lock journey, right? And another thing is it's going to thin out the length of the locks. Your locks are not going to grow to be as fast and as thick as possible. Now, you may be able to get away with it. I know maybe some people have asked me, like, I have a very, very important occasion I want to attend, and I just cannot, like, I'm not confident enough to wear my locks, right? Can I do like box braids or something just once, and can I get away with it? Now, the answer to that question is yes and no. You may be able to get away with this if you wear the style like maybe once or twice and you don't wear the style in for long, right? And you go ahead and give your locks the TLC afterwards, you may be able to get away with it. But depending on how the state of your hair or the state of your locks when you're starting out, and how damaged, like how tight you do the style, and like if whoever does the style doesn't really know how to handle locks and doesn't like have information about locks at the back of their mind, it can actually cause damages that will take months or even up to a year for you to recover from. So I often advise people, like, if you can't go outside, if you're in a phase right now that you feel like you're not confident enough to go out with your starter locks, the best thing you can do is you can wear a hat, you can wear like head coverings, head gears and things like that, instead of wearing like going ahead to like install box braids or like hairstyles basically with hair extensions. Now, another thing, even though I don't recommend this, but if you must use extensions, it's better for you to just like cover your locks with like a wig cap and just wear a wig. You can wear a big afro wig, because I feel like afro wigs are kind of easier to use when you have locks because they are big and fluffy, and so even though your hair, like your locks, would not be flat, because basically you can't really get locks as flat as loose natural hair, right? But the fact that it's like big and fluffy, you may be able to pull that off even with your locks. So if you must wear like extensions or like added hair, I would say wear like an afro wig. Even though many people, even with the afro wigs, you still have issues around your edges, and if you're always wearing wigs over your starter locks, it's going to flatten the locks and not allow your locks to get as thick as possible. So this is not something I recommend that you should do all the time. But say you have somewhere you need to go, you don't feel confident enough, you just have to wear something else other than your hair, the best option is a wig. But don't make it a habit. Another thing that you should not do with your starter locks, if you want your locks to be as thick and as rich and as voluminous and as healthy as possible, is for you to not start your lock journey with lock extensions. Now, I have a video where I talked about the pros and the cons of lock extensions and helping you figure out if lock extensions are for you. I'm going to link that video up in the iCards. Starting your locks with lock extensions, even though it may seem like the wise thing to do if you probably are starting with short hair, or you want to skip the frizzy lock stage, and just have healthy full locks, right? Even though it may seem like that's the wise thing to do, in the long run, if you're trying to get your locks to be as thick as possible, that is not going to give you what you desire. Because the thing about lock extensions, it's like you're putting weight on your own hair, right? And what happens is the lock extensions, no matter whether you like it or not, lock extensions will weigh down your own hair, and so it will not allow your own hair to swell up and fluff up and thicken up as possible, as much as possible. And so if you start your lock journey with lock extensions, there's no way to, your locks will not be as thick as it can possibly be. Like, there's no way to sugarcoat this. That is the truth. Now, is it possible for you to have healthy hair, healthy, like not damaged locks, even when you start your lock journey with lock extensions? The answer is yes. Even though, yes, your locks can be healthy, but you're not going to have that. You know how when you see people with locks and you can just like, oh my goodness, like your locks look so, you know, rich and thick, and like it just looks like you have a lot of hair. You can't achieve that with lock extension. I'm sorry, like I'm sorry. if that's your goal, starting with lock extensions will not give you that, because for the period where you have the lock extensions in your locks, it's going to be weighing down the base, like your own hair, your own natural hair, your own natural locks that are trying to grow. And so your locks are not going to swell up and fluff up as much as possible. That's the plain truth. Argue, no matter how much you like to argue, that's the truth. And I've had people who comment, because I've shared this before on my channel. And I had people commenting that, oh, I have lock extensions. I started with lock extensions. My hair is fine. My hair is healthy. Blah 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 blah. And I went ahead to see, like their locks, right? And you can obviously see that the extension is weighing down the hair. It's not that kind of big, full, voluminous locks that we're talking about. You can obviously see that this person, I don't know. If you're new to lock journey and things like that, you may not be able to tell the difference. I don't know if maybe for you can't tell, but for me, I can always tell when the person has lock extensions, because even though the extensions may look perfect and thick and full and everything like that, but every time I see people with lock extensions, you always see that unnatural weight that the extension has on the length, on the natural locks that are trying to grow at the base. And for as long as you have that weight on your hair, your locks will not grow as thick and as full and as fluffy as possible. Even though your locks are not going to be as full and as thick as possible, is it possible for you to have healthy locks, or healthy locks to the best that is possible with lock extensions? The answer is yes. If you use lock extensions that are not too heavy for your own hair. So what I mean is, the extensions that you're adding to your hair should be lighter than the section of hair that you're putting that extension on. If you're putting light extension and then the extension is not super long, and you, as time goes by, you gradually cut out the lock extensions until you eventually cut out everything from your hair, it is possible for you to have healthy locks, healthy looking locks, right? By healthy, I mean there's no damage in sight, right? That does not mean that the locks will be as thick as, you can't, no matter how you play around it, you still see that unhealthy weight on the length of the locks whenever some people start their locks to look. I always notice it. Like, I've even people who claim that everything is fine, every time I see, I always notice it. So yeah, it's always there, but you may be able to get away with like having your locks look not get damaged or not look damaged if you follow these things that I've shared. But if you're trying to get your locks to be very thick, like as juicy and as thick and as voluminous as possible, starting with lock extensions is not actually the best option for you. Next thing you don't want to do to your starter locks, and this doesn't necessarily affect like how thick your locks are going to get per se, but it may cause issues down the line, is for you to combine your locks carelessly, especially in the starter lock phase. I see so many people do this when they first start out their locks, maybe when they are in like first, second, third month of their lock journey. They feel like they see some of their locks and they feel like, like these locks are too small, and they're afraid that the lock is going to break off, and so they just go ahead and carelessly combine that lock to a neighboring lock so that the base is stronger. Even though this may make sense in the moment, but in the long run, as your locks mature, it may cause issues down the line. For example, if you're combining that lock to a neighboring lock that doesn't really fit perfectly to that lock, eventually, as your locks get more mature, you're going to have that unnatural tension on that new lock that now has a wide, uneven, or like unnatural base, right? And so if you're someone who likes to retwist their locks, or even if you don't retwist your locks, even if you're a freeformer, when it combines and the base is like kind of like uneven in a way, it may cause issues when you style your locks. So let's say you put like combine two locks around your edges, it may affect how that new lock falls, you know, because now the base has an uneven shape, right? And so whenever you style your locks, maybe you put your locks up or whatever, you may start to experience pain. And if you're someone who likes to retwist, it may start to get painful. Another issue that can arise if you carelessly combine your locks in the starter lock phase is, you may think, because in the starter lock phase your locks have not gotten to the maximum thickness that is going to, you know, achieve eventually as your locks mature. So what happens is you think that the lock is too skinny, and so you go ahead and combine. But months down the line, the new resulting lock becomes super big, and now it just looks weird standing beside other locks that have a certain size, you know. And so if you're someone who is interested in certain kind of aesthetics, that may cause like issues for you. Another thing is, if you combine your locks carelessly, what happens is you change the shape of your parts, and that will eventually affect the shape of the resulting lock. So for example, if all your locks have like circular or like square shaped parts, you know, and then you go ahead and combine two locks together such that the new resulting lock now has a rectangular shape, what happens is rectangular shapes generally forms flat locks. And so if you're someone who wants to have more cylindrical looking locks, you're going to notice that that new lock that you have formed as your locks mature is going to eventually start to form flat. And so you're going to have to over manipulate that lock if you're trying to stop it or prevent it from being flat, and that can cause stress and like issues down the line. So what I say is, if at all you have to combine your starter locks, if you're convinced that you want to combine your locks, make sure that you're combining locks that naturally want to stay together and locks that form the shape and size of parts that are like similar to like all your other locks like around your head. So yeah, that's something you need to bear in mind. Another thing you don't want to do if you're in starter lock phase is for you to fight your shrinkage. Now I see so many people do this. They cannot wait to have their locks hang down and like, you know, get to their shoulder or get to their back and things like that. And so you see people banding and stretching and pulling and packing and styling just so that their locks don't shrink as much. Now the thing about locks is, whether if you like fight your shrinkage from now till forever, you're never going to be able to completely eliminate shrinkage when it comes to your lock journey. Your locks will shrink whether you like it or not. Now if you're constantly fighting this, yes, you can reduce how much it shrinks, but the more you reduce the shrinkage, the slimmer and less thick and less voluminous your resulting locks are going to be. So that's a downside if you're trying to get your locks to be as thick as possible. Now another thing is, even if no matter how you fight your shrinkage, you're never going to win. You're never going to win the battle. You're just going to stress yourself, and at the end of the day your locks will eventually shrink whether you like it or not, to an extent. To shrink. Now you may be able to reduce how much it shrinks if you're always fighting, but it will still shrink. And I've never seen anyone who did not experience, even if it's just like a little, your locks will surely shrink whether you like it or not. And so if you're always fighting it, you're going to notice that beginning stage of your lock journey is going to be so difficult and so stressful, because you're basically fighting against the properties of your hair. And so that beginning stage is not going to be blissful at all. So I always encourage people in the starter lock phase, no matter how much your locks shrink, just let it shrink. Let it shrink and be done with the shrinkage. Just allow it to shrink as much as it wants to shrink, and know that, okay, yes, it has shrunken, and go on with your life. And I feel like that's the best thing that you can do. That's one of the best things that you can do for your locks in starter lock phase if you're trying to get your locks to be as thick as possible. Now another thing you don't want to do in starter lock phase, if you want your locks to be as thick and as rich as possible, is for you to you don't want to use locking products when you retwist in the starter lock phase. And even when you're starting your lock journey, you don't want to use locking products. What I mean by locking products is all those locking gels and locking waxes and like custards and things like that. The reason why I don't recommend you using that is all those locking gels kind of like hold your locks or hold the strands of your hair bound, and so that is not going to allow your locks to swell up as much as possible. And if you're always retwisting your locks with those locking products, and many people retwist the base and apply all those locking products down the length of their locks, what happens is your locks are not going to thicken up as much as you can possibly thicken up, and so your locks are going to be more skinny than it's than how it should normally be, right? Another thing is all those products will eventually cause build up in your locks down the line. Like, the thing about locks is many people be like, oh my goodness, I've been using this since the start of my lock journey. I've been locked for 6 months, everything's fine, I don't have build up. Yes, you don't have build up yet. The thing about locks is all those bad practices that you follow in the early stages of your lock journey, you're not going to see that immediately, but eventually, as your locks get more mature, in the 1, 2, 3 year mark, all those bad things that you did back then that you were like, oh, I've gotten away with it, you're going to start to see repercussions of it down the line. And by that time, it's probably too late, you know. So all those locking products cause build up over time, because the truth about locks is most times all those like locking products, people use a lot of them because they're trying to get their locks to look a certain way, and because they're using so much, whenever they go ahead and wash their locks, they don't get all of that out, and so you're going to have little quantity of those locking products remaining in their locks, you know, month after month after month, or like weeks after weeks after, depending on how often you use them, right? And eventually all those things add up, and that's why you see people that their locks just look dirty even after a fresh wash, and that's because of build up. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes people think that, oh, that's not a big deal, I can always go ahead and do a lock detox and get everything out. But the truth is, when you have that kind of like massive build up, it's not always that straightforward or that easy to get it out, right? So the best thing is for you to prevent it in the first place. Now, another thing you don't want to do, and this is also similar to what I mentioned earlier, is for you to excessively oil your scalp and your locks generally, because I see so many people do this. I see so many people do this. They are like too heavy-handed whenever they are putting oils in their locks, because people feel like locks are lightweight and blah blah blah. I only use oils and water in my locks, and so they think they can go ahead and put as much oil, like a truckload of oils in their locks, and everything will be fine. Like many people, you can see, I see so many hair moisturize, lock moisturizing videos and lock wash day videos, and you can see they just pour the oil in their hands, or like pour the oil. You see them pouring the oil on their scalp and on like the length of their locks. The thing about that is, and you can obviously see, even on camera, you can obviously see that this person's hair is oily. This person's locks are oily after the whole moisturizing session. Now, the downside to this is, even though oils are lightweight and things like that, even oils can cause build up over time, because if you're putting a lot of oils in your locks, there's a high chance that whenever you wash your locks, you're not getting rid of all of that or all of those oils, right? And so eventually, years down the line, all those oils are going to cause build up in your locks. Now, that's one side. Another thing is, when you have a lot of oil, when your hair is oily, it attracts dust, it attracts dirt, it attracts lint. And when you have lint build up in your locks, it is very complicated to get out when the lint gets, you know, embedded in your locks, right? And so don't use too much. Whether you're using oils that are super lightweight, it's never a good idea to put a lot of products in your locks. If you're someone who every time you moisturize, your hair is always like oily, if you touch your locks, you see a lot of oils in your hands, you're using too much product, and you should definitely reduce it. All those products are going to cause issues for you down the line. Another thing you don't want to do to your starter locks, if you want your locks to be as thick and as healthy and as voluminous as possible, is for you to another thing you want to do is, you don't want to comb your locks even when you are retwisting. I see so many people comb the base of their lock whenever they are retwist. What that does is, you're basically just slowing down your locking process. And then you comb the locks and go ahead and apply your locking product, your locking gel, and you think that you're doing something good. You're not. You're just fighting your hair, untangling all the tangles that your locks need to lock, and then going ahead to put products that will cause build up down the line. You can, there's no big deal in like retwisting if that's what you're into, but try not to comb the base of your locks whenever you retwist, because what you're doing is, when you're combing your locks, what you're doing is you're detangling your locks, right? And locks need tangles to lock. Hair needs tangles to lock, right? And that thing that you're doing is you're pushing all of your shed hairs from your roots to the length of the locks, and what happens is you end up with very flat looks, very flat roots rather, and absolutely no volume at the top of your head. And that is why you see so many people, even though as their locks get longer and longer, they have so much volume down here. That's one of the reasons why you see so many people with locks. They have so much volume down here and no volume towards their scalp, because they're always pushing all the shed hairs down the length of their locks, and so all the shed hairs, they're pushing away from the locks, and whenever you have no volume up top, your locks just look like it's not voluminous. You know, so try as much as you can to not comb your locks whenever you retwist, even if you're in starter lock phase, because I see so many locticians do this and it's like they use the comb to lock the hair and that's just counterproductive, right? So if you're trying to get your locks to be as thick as possible, this is something that you really don't want to do. Another thing you don't want to do if you're trying to get your locks to be as thick as possible is you don't want to wear lock styles too often. I see so many people who are always wearing lock styles. They're always wearing barrel twist and two-strand twist and, you know, different styles like that. There are people, I know people who retwist every 4 weeks, and whenever they retwist, they put their locks in a lock style and wear that lock style for at least 2 weeks to 4 weeks, and then go ahead and retwist again and repeat the process. If you're always doing that, your locks are not going to be as thick as possible. Like, I'm sorry. You can't have that thick, rich locks that is like, oh my goodness, your locks are so thick. You can't have that by always binding your hair in lock styles. You need to let your locks loose. You need to let your locks free and things like that, so that your locks can swell up and fluff up as much as possible. Another thing you don't want to do if you're in starter lock phase is you don't want to not wash your locks, because I see many locticians advise their customers and their clients to not wash their locks for 3 months, 2 months and the likes, because they feel like if they wash their locks, their starter style will unravel, and so that will affect the locking process. Now, if you understand how locks, I've said it so many times on my channel, if you understand how locks form, you understand that unraveling is part of the locking process because it's not the lock style that you have done that actually locks hair. As long as you have a coil pattern to your hair, as long as your hair has a coil pattern, your hair locks by default. If you allow it, if you're not combing it out and like removing shed hairs and untangling it, your hair locks on its own, and unraveling that happens whenever you wash is part of the locking process, right? And so you should not avoid washing your locks, because washing your locks is going to help your hair lock faster if you have hair that has a coil pattern. Now, if you have super straight hair that doesn't like form coils, then it may make sense for your loctician to say, okay, don't wash, because for people like that, their locks, they actually go to manually lock their hair, and it is actually a style. Like, locks, many people think of locks as a style, but it's more than a style. It is a continuous process. If you have locks, your hair is constantly going through the locking process as long as you have locks in your head. So it's not like a one-time thing that, oh, I'm going to lock my hair and that's it. Your hair is constantly going through the process, right? And so it is not your starter style that is locking the hair per se. Your hair is naturally going through the process, and those starter styles just help to keep your locks in sections so that your locks form in those sections. So please go ahead and wash your hair. You don't have to wait to wash. Now, if you have issues and you know have other reasons why you prefer not to wash your locks, like do what you want, right? But if you're someone who is trying to get your locks to be as thick as possible, washing helps you to achieve that, because washing helps your locks to swell up and fluff up, and it speeds up the locking process. So this is going to do you a lot of good. And the thing about not washing your locks is most times people who do not wash their locks, they have put in a lock product to help lock the hair, and so their hair remains bound in that starter style. And so as soon as you wash that locking product out of the hair is loose again, because you've not allowed the hair strands to, you know, intertwine and tangle and start the locking process. So yeah, I've said this several times on my channel, so I'm not going to dwell too much on that. Please go ahead and wash your locks. Even if you have starter locks, unraveling is part of the locking process. Now, if you want me to explain, you want to see where I explain better, talking about unraveling of locks and how to handle unraveling if you have starter locks, I have a video on it on my channel already. I'll link it up in the iCards so that you know how to handle it when it happens. Another thing you don't want to do if you have starter locks is for you to not lay on your locks when they are wet or damp, because what happens is, when your hair is in starter lock phase, your hair is like the softest that is going to be throughout your locking process, you know. And so at this stage, it is very easy for you to mold your locks into shapes that will eventually, you know, be the base of how your locks will look eventually as the locks mature. So if you're always lying down on wet or damp hair or wet or damp locks, it's going to be flattening your locks, right? And the thing about flat locks is the flat locks tend not to look as voluminous, because like when your hair is like in a cylindrical, you know, shape, it looks more voluminous like overall, you know. And so if you're trying to get your locks to be as thick as possible, then you'd want to try as much as possible to not flatten your locks by laying down on it when it is wet or damp. Now, the last and final thing that we're going to be sharing in this video that you should not do if you want your locks to be as thick as possible is for you to not use conditioners and like herbs in powder form in your locks. And the reason why I usually say that you should not do this in your locks is that all those, generally, conditioners are meant to be used in bulk. Like, you can't use conditioner and put a dime size, right? That's not the concept of using conditioners. When people use conditioners, they put, you know, enough conditioners and working into their hair and things like that. Now, the thing about loose natural hair is all your hair strands are standing on their own, and so if you go ahead and, you know, layer your conditioner in there, it's going to help with sleep, it's going to help with detangling, and it's going to be easier to rinse out based on the fact that your hair strands are standing one by one on their own, basically. Now, the thing about locks is number one, you need tangles for your locks to form, and so you really don't need anything that will help to detangle your locks. Now, that's one of the things. But another thing is all those conditioners and herbs in powder form are kind of difficult to rinse out of locks, because you're using a lot. There's a high chance that when you go ahead and rinse that out, you're not going to get in all of that out. You're still going to have a little bit of all of that in your locks. And if you continue to do this back to back to back to back, all those products accumulate in your locks, and years down the line you see that you have build up, and you can't just explain why that happened, right? Because you think, oh, I wash my locks, but you just have build up, and that's because of all the products that you're allowing to get into your locks and you're not getting it out properly. Now, if you want to use herbs, I feel like one of the best ways to use herbs in locks is for you to have it infused in like probably water or oil. That is kind of easier to get out than in the plain powder form. So yeah, with that, we've come to the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you guys learned one or two things. If you did, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And if this is your first time on my channel and you like to see more videos from me, you like to learn more about how to get your locks to be as healthy, as thick, as rich, and as voluminous as possible, then definitely subscribe. I make videos every week. So thank you so much for watching. See you guys in my next video.